The Madness of the Lone Wanderer. A short story by Dylan Busby. 3 years, 268 days, 17 hours, and 38 minutes since the comms went out. Jupiter was the furthest reaching outpost of human communications, and now all Kevin had were the bots. There were 7 bots that all served distinct purposes on the vast vessel. V-27, the Little Butler, as he was commonly called, oversaw the cleaning of the entire ship, and with Kevin being the only person to make messes, the Little Butler spent most of his time trailing after Kevin, fussing after his messes. Even now, as Kevin stood staring into the endless blackness, the Little Butler sat, watching patiently, waiting for Kevin to make a mistake so that he could clean up the mess. "Go away," Kevin said, annoyed by the small robot. He turned back to look at the robot. It came up only to his knee, its thick black tracks covered with an industrial cloth, so that it mopped as it moved. Its white body was metal with a yellow trim. A red light beaconed out from its square head when it was in the process of cleaning. "I could put you out there, you know. One command in the computer and you'll never bother me again." The little robot didn't move. It kept its silent gaze fixed on Kevin. He felt smaller. Kevin took one more look into the void. Nestled in the many lights was his home. On Earth, he had been just a normal man. He earned his engineering degree in 4 years and was married a few years later to his love, Avery. Avery had been a military pilot. She was spunky, a maverick, as much Tom Cruise in Top Gun as he was Toby in The Office. With his degree and her pilot skills, they were one of the first 15 families to be contacted by the Flyers of Tomorrow, a private space exploration company. The Flyers had provided the rockets for when the United World Government set up a base on Mars, and was the first company to begin drilling and mining the asteroid belt. 25 years ago, the Flyers reached out to 15 eligible families to pioneer the exploration of the outer planets and the universe. They launched from Tycho Prime, with most of the civilized world watching and cheering. It took only minutes for the first disaster to strike. 3 of the 5 ships launched at the same time. The Old Man was supposed to be the 3rd ship to launch, but it fired off seconds before the initial thrusters of its sister ship, Humanity's Herald. Stargazer was not long after, shooting off quickly, and was the bridge between Humanity's Herald and the Old Man. The resulting explosion dwarfed the great nuclear disaster that ripped apart the Chinese coast and wiped the great Korean theology from the earth. Even so far above the disaster, Kevin and Avery could feel the heat from it, and Carson, their captain, was permanently blinded when he chanced a glance out the window of the Lone Wanderer at the wrong time. For hours, the only sounds were the screams of Carson and the quick clicks of Med 62, as the robot tried in vain to save the man's vision. After 3 hours, the comms finally came on, and the main base told them that they were to continue the mission. Command passed to Jordan, a Harvard graduate who commanded several battalions during the 5th Water War. Her husband was furious. He was a bore of a man and could not fathom a woman having command over him, especially not a woman who had been relegated to a housewife after they married. Kevin turned away from the infinite blackness, with a mind clouded on events that felt so far away. He strolled to the greenery to get away from the Little Butler. The greenery was immense, 1 acre of land filled with tomatoes, potatoes, wheat, and every other plant someone could think of, and a small area dedicated to the raising and slaughter of genetically engineered micro-animals. Born from frozen embryos and sperm, the small pigs and cows were around 1/4 of the size of the fully grown animals they were based on. The entire acre was tended to by 2 robots, the Green Hands. FNA 37R and FNA 37L were large robots, 10 foot tall and 4 foot wide. The bulky bots were built with the ability to pull any tool from their carnivorous bellies. Nearly identical, they could only be told apart by the green handprints painted across their chest. One was a left hand, the other was a right. Kevin had programmed them to respond to being called left and right. "Left, come here," Kevin called. He glanced back to the entrance of the greenery and was satisfied to see the annoying cleaning robot was no longer his metal shadow. All robots outside of the green hand were barred from entering the greenery so that they didn't disrupt the plant life. "I want steak tonight, so have a cow prepared." The monstrous machine rolled off without a noise. There was hardly any noise in his aluminum coffin. He walked out and shuffled toward the kitchens. In the kitchens, there was one bot, the elegant Cook 276. One of the oldest lines ever produced, it looked the most human. "Ramsey, I want a steak tonight. I'll let you decide the rest," Kevin said. He had named the robot after his grandmother's favorite chef. He had been long dead by the time Kevin was born, but his grandmother told stories of this near mythic figure in the cooking community. Kevin began to wander. The spaceship was so massive it would take Kevin 4 hours to walk from end to end, and most systems being automated, he never had much to do, besides stare into the deep, silent blackness that enveloped the ship. Kevin soon found himself near the mechanical room. He froze. How did he wind up here, he thought? He stared down at his feet, as if to demand the reason they had betrayed him and brought him here of all places. After spending a long time in the shadow of the room's dense metal door, he walked off towards the computer room and hoped the systems would have some menial task to occupy his mind. By the time he reached the computer room, he realized something was wrong. It was not the fact that something had happened. The ship was running normally, and nothing looked out of place. But it was the lack of something that shook him to his core. The little butler was nowhere in sight. For years, the damned bot followed him like a shadow, red gaze judging him. But now it was gone, and it had been gone for several hours. He turned around and looked down the long, brightly lit corridors. But it was nowhere to be seen. It should have gone off its roaming cycle as soon as he left the greenery. And it could move up to 60 miles an hour, so there was no chance he had outmaneuvered it. He strode into the computer room and vigorously tapped the screen. But nothing happened. The computer systems would not react. It was completely offline. He called for TCE-56, or Tech as Avery had nicknamed the polite little robot, but he would not come either. Kevin hunted for Tech, checking every cupboard and hideaway he could think of, but still he found nothing. Finally, he entered a closet not far from the medical bay. That's where he saw Tech, or rather, what was left of Tech. The little robot his darling Avery had been so enamored with was ripped apart, as if some mighty gorilla had gotten its hands on it. Kevin knew he would need to go into the mechanical room to get the supplies he needed if he had any hope to repair the robot. And he had to repair Tech, to be sure. Tech was his only hope to get the computer up and running. As he walked to the mechanical room, he tried to remember what had happened to the little robot and where little Butler had gone. He began to panic, thinking whatever tore apart Tech had gotten to the little Butler, and now might be headed for him. He was running now, breathing hard. All he wanted was to get Tech repaired so that he could get the cameras on and find out what was in this ship with him. As he turned the corner, he froze. Standing down the hallway was the figure of a woman. She would have been beautiful if not for the drill hole that tunneled straight through her skull. Crimson trails ran down her face from her eyes, her nose, and the gaping hole in her head. "Jordan?" Kevin called, choking on the question as the pale face stared at him. Kevin started to take steps backwards. I didn't do it," he pleaded. "I just took apart the fat nurse." She never broke her gaze. Kevin slipped and fell hard. He looked down to see what he had slipped on, only to find a pool of blood beneath him. His eyes shot up to find the sightless eyes of Carson, who was standing next to his wife. Both had red smiles drooling from their necks. Kevin scrambled to his feet and ran. Jordan was now gone, but Kevin had long forgotten her. By the time he stopped to catch his breath, he once again found himself outside the huge metal door of the mechanical room. Icy sweat ran in wet fingers down his body. How long had it been since he last unlocked the door and let light touch the devastating demons that slept within? Kevin slowly walked towards the keypad to raise the mighty metal door. As his fingers were enveloped in the blue glow of the keypad, he heard a small voice, no more than a ghost of a whisper. "Kev," it called. "Kev, it's so cold." He would not look, he told himself. He could not look. "Kev, I'm so scared," it cried to him. What's happening?" Memories raked across his brain. It had all happened so fast, so much blood. "I'm sorry," he screamed. I didn't know. He turned to look at her, Avery, his beloved. Her skull had been half caved in, with the right eye bulging out of her skull. Her stomach had been ripped open. With her right hand, she tried to hold in the purple worms that threatened to spill out of her belly. Kevin fell to his knees, with tears running down his cheeks. When he looked up, she was towering over him, dead eyes glaring into his soul. He shook with fear and began to crawl backwards into the mechanical room. He did not remember opening the door, yet here he was. He slowly rose into the blackness of the room. Looking back, he saw Avery was no longer in the corridor. Now he was alone, with his dark secrets. He dared not turn on the lights and see what he knew was in the room. See what caused the stench that was in the air. He stepped over Med 6-2. The fat nurse had been taken apart with surgical precision. He kept his eyes low, not wanting to look at the bloody handprints that covered the walls. The room only had one light, a bright red light that emanated from the small blocky shape in the corner. Kevin knew where the tools he would need to fix Tech were, but he could not find it in his stomach to cross the room into the blackest corner. "There you are, boy," a voice said. It was deep. It had once belonged to a barrel-chested man many years ago. "It was a cruel trick you played on me, boy." It was full of angry laughter. "But I guess it was a cruel trick I played on you first." Kevin saw the outline of Robert's corpse, a blacker-than-black shape in the deep darkness. "You lied to me. You killed them. You killed everyone," Kevin managed to say, his eyes watering. "We killed everyone, boy," the voice countered. Kevin had grown used to the black and now could see the details of the skeleton's skull. "All I did was decommission a robot. All I did was do what I was told," he said defensively. "We couldn't let those women rule us," Robert's ghost shouted. "And Carson was blind. He was useless. All I wanted to do was go home." Kevin looked at the corpse with pity. "Now you are home, Robert. Now you are in hell with me." Kevin walked towards the door Robert had locked so long ago. The monster stared at him. If Kevin lived 1,000 years, the monster would still outlive him. It was trapped in the tool room with its blood-stained weapons. Kevin supposed that he could not blame it, in truth, because like him, it was just doing what it was told. He stared at Robert's monster, and it stared back. He began to wonder which of them was Robert's real monster. He was beginning to bring his hand to the blue glow of the keypad when the monster erupted in anger. It slammed against the wall and the door. It threatened him with implements of murder. Kevin paused. If he opened the door, he knew what would happen. He knew he would see Robert again, in a different kind of hell. His hand faltered. Kevin locked the mechanical room and strode towards the observation deck. The little butler rolled behind him, waiting for him to make a mess. It had been 3 years, 269 days, 1 hour, and 48 minutes since the comms went out. And now, all Kevin had were the bots and his ghost.